When I was a kid, before going to school, I would often begin my day by opening up Cerebi, seeing the latest in Pokemon news, and then just clicking around. At the time, I was into looking at screenshots of the latest upcoming Pokemon episode before it aired, and pictures of Pokemon cards, mainly because I really love Pokemon. I took in all this visual information, but more often than not, when I looked at a picture, I just looked at it for a bit before moving on to the next. As a kid who grew up with animation and was brought up during the reign of Michael Bay and James Cameron, I was never really taught how to appreciate a single frame of a picture for the sake of itself. To me, the media was film, TV, video games, and some music. Oh, and YouTube videos too. Everything had motion in waves. Even with Blue's Clues or Dora, the idea of pausing things and taking in a single picture for no external or selfish purpose would have made no sense to me. Yet I can clearly remember one Pokemon card that made me stop and pause and just take it in silently. That card was Cynthia's Feelings, illustrated by Ken Sugimori for the Legends Awaken expansion of the Pokemon trading card game. The first thing I want to focus on is the posing of Cynthia. The main thing that caught the attention of Kid Me was just how quiet the card was. Usually Pokemon cards at this time, when they weren't basically pseudo-stock art, had Pokemon being alive and active, especially with how wild level X cards looked for the time. Besides the foreign building, which is a video for another time, I never really got a strong impression of the Pokemon world being one where a person could just sit and think quietly. Like, yes, I understood trainers could go to places like restaurants or relax at a hotel. I didn't understand what this action was at the time. I never really seen a character, especially those in cartoons or movies, do this before. This disconnect was made even more powerful when I saw that Cynthia, of all people, was doing this thing. At the time, I couldn't really articulate what this action was, but now as an adult, I know that this is a picture of Cynthia silently pondering at a Pokeball. To me as a kid, this didn't match my personal image of who Cynthia was. To me, Cynthia was practically this archetype of power. Even though on my used copy of Pokemon Diamond, I had this super overpowered team inherited from a guy who was likely using Action Replay, the combination of being shocked that there was another trainer after the Elite Four, the fast piano, the evil magic looking circle room, the actual battle song, and the first Pokemon she sent out that my Rayquaza couldn't damage for some reason, kind of left a mental scar on me. And here she is, looking at a Pokeball. From the way she holds it, it's reasonable to infer that she's not in a battle. Otherwise, she would be gripping it, just like in every other moment a Pokeball is seen. Whenever I saw a Pokeball in the video games or in the anime, it was almost always in the context of either sending out or catching a Pokemon. To hold a Pokeball with this gentle hold and to look at it with a soft, tender expression showed this side of a trainer, no, a franchise that I never really saw before. While the popular image of Cynthia is her being this no-holds-barred demigod dragon tamer who kicks butt and takes names, it's easy to forget that she's a woman who loves folklore and mythology. It makes total sense for her to be silent and find happiness in the smaller things. You see, while stories and videos inspired by them tend to be popular, the study of folklore and mythology is a relatively niche subject. It tends to attract the kind of people who are silent and analytical. They're the kind of people who will write essays, make podcasts, and create long presentations that mention symbolism, archetypes, motifs, theology, anthropology, history, psychology, dreams, and perhaps a name drop of Joseph Campbell here and there, if they even agree with his monomyth idea at all. Basically, if one were to imagine the kind of media diet Cynthia would have, think less of Percy Jackson and more of the language of creation, cosmic symbolism and Genesis, a commentary. I couldn't understand it at the time, but now as an adult, I appreciate this side of Cynthia. As a reader of mythology and folktales, I've been pretty shocked to discover how many similar tropes and motifs can be, even when the tales come from different nations. For example, France, Hungary, and Mozambique have a story of a main character helping out a snake and then being led by said snake to its snake king. Both Greek mythology and Norwegian folklore share a story of a girl who is persuaded to look at her hidden lover by non-electric light that drips hot material that wakes him up and causes him to leave, leading to adventures that further take the girl out of her comfort zone. Outside of my rather rushed motif research, Africa, China, and Native America may be super different places with vast amounts of unique history. They all share a Cinderella story. In a nutshell, when one reads folklore and mythology, one is entering into the collective memories and imaginations of people who have existed since time immemorial. Yet, even though we're separated by oceans and millennia, we have similar hopes, dreams, fears, desires, and even sins. It's perhaps not an exaggeration when Russian philosopher Ivan Ilyin says that fairy tales are the beginning of all philosophy. If you think I'm overthinking right now, just remember that even Cynthia has this tendency too. To bring things on a less cosmic brain level, I want to mention the background. It's a mix between Cynthia's official room in Diamond and Pearl and an open stadium that's a familiar sight to the Pokemon franchise. As I basically said before, the original Diamond and Pearl champion room is burned into my memory. It looks like the room of some evil mage or the eye of some mysterious creature in an Eastern European animated movie. And I'm not exaggerating that much here. While Pokemon Platinum has modified the room and it matches more with Cynthia's color scheme, this will always be my nostalgic favorite. One thing I want to focus on though is the ball Cynthia's holding. It's a luxury ball. The luxury ball raises the friendship a Pokemon has with its trainer because of how comfortable it is. However, it only has a catch rate modifier of 1 times. It doesn't make Pokemon easier to catch. Yet it costs around 1,000 to 3,000 Pokédollars, which is more expensive than a netball that makes catching water and bug-type Pokemon at least 3 times as easy, while being just around more or less and often more expensive than an Ultra Ball, which makes it twice as easy to catch Pokemon in general. If one is buying a luxury ball, you're making a deliberate choice to make a sacrifice of sorts into a Pokeball that's only made to offer love and comfort to a Pokemon. I don't just mean love in the modern sentimental way, I mean the more traditional meaning of love, summed up by St. Thomas Aquinas as the choice to will the good of the other. In a world about growing in friendship, to use a luxury ball means you likely treasure a Pokemon in a way most people don't think twice about. It's a deeper and more purposeful act. Now the question we're left to ask is, what Pokemon is inside that ball? Of course, the tempting answer is to say that the Pokemon inside is Garchomp. After all, Garchomp is basically Cynthia's mascot by this point. However, of all the Pokemon Cynthia has owned, I personally feel that the Pokemon inside is Gastrodon. Yup, I'm not joking, hear me out. To me, what tends to signify almost all of Cynthia's Pokemon is just how rare they are to get. You can't get a Spiritomb without basically doing a multiplayer ritual with the Sinnoh Underground. You need to find super specific spots in Mount Coronet to find a Feebas, and do a specific mechanic with cooking to eventually get a Milotic. Besides an egg by Cynthia, you basically can't get a Togepi and Sinnoh before this postgame. Sure, you can find a Badoo and evolve it, but finding a shiny stone to eventually evolve the Roselia is not as easy. However, Shellos is much easier to come by compared to something like a Riolu. To me, Shellos might have been the first Pokemon Cynthia would have met up close as a child, perhaps met during a field trip to the Canalave Library, which houses Sinnoh myth and folklore. Also, if one was to counter my opinion by saying that there was no way Cynthia would have access to a luxury ball as a kid, just remember that's Pokemon. Pokeballs can be customized, broken, or even eaten. I'm pretty sure champions have a way with that stuff. Yes, Gastrodon is not a strong Pokemon at all, compared to Garchomp or tanky like Milotic. Yet it just seems to be a Pokemon Cynthia appreciates because of personal reasons, beyond justifying the image of an unbeatable champion. Gastrodon is a humble Pokemon, for more than one reason. One old meaning for the word humble stems from the word that means ground. In other words, to be humble in a post-Christian sense means to recognize and understand that you are of the earth and not some special chosen one who's here to single-handedly save the world, but a product of God, family, society, principalities, and other forces and choices that made you who you are today. It's a self-awareness that allows one to shift from constantly focusing on yourself and what you want and what you think the world should be, and turning towards helping others and doing what you can to make this world, flaws and all, a better place. This word might not mean much, and one could just simply say that Gastrodon is on her team because of the weird Pokédex Diamond and Pearl hat. But I like to think that Gastrodon is like a personification of Cynthia's humility. Cynthia treats myth and folklore with reverence. From what I see, it's essentially the main way she finds out about the history of Sinnoh and the Pokemon that inhabit it. She's rooted in them, grounded in them. However, there's another person who takes mythology seriously, and that's Cyrus. Unlike Cynthia, however, he doesn't treat myth or folklore as the great ancestral dream clouds that they are. They're used as a means for Cyrus to push for his vision of a new world in which emotion and spirit were removed. As the player drills deeper into Team Galactic's plans, it's revealed Cyrus never even wanted his own team to inhabit this new world. He wants the new world all to himself, even if it comes at the cost of other lives. After Giratina is caught or defeated in Platinum, Cyrus remains in the Distortion world, hoping that the player will awaken to a new world under his dominion. But I think it's safe to say he doomed himself to be trapped forever in a world that's just as irrational as himself. In the Hebrew Bible, King Cyrus was a liberator of the Jewish people and was a type of foreshadowed Christ liberating souls, the divine uniter of the heavens and the earth. Cyrus in Pokemon, however, is like a type of the Antichrist, who wishes to permanently separate the spiritual from the material and condemns himself to a place he hopes to be a paradise, but is in reality his own hell. So yeah, don't forget where you came from, even if it's not cool to other people's eyes. In a sense, this whole card is not about a cool pose or a snapshot of a battle. I interpret this as a picture of contemplation and finding gratitude and peace in the little moments. It's been over 15 years since this card came out, and I believe that this contemplative type of media is still a pretty rare kind, at least in America, and especially in a lot of recent Pokemon media that tries to be cool and sakuga as possible. Even recent cards of Cynthia, again, play into this image of the near-invincible demigod dragon tamer, with barely any cards that showcase her love of research and lore. This isn't to denigrate artists and animators who are far more talented and successful than I am. I'm just a bit concerned. As I'm writing this script, there's a contentious debate on the morality of AI art and the pushback of many artists against its use. Whatever side you're on, I think it's safe to say that a few social media campaigns and a few legal battles probably aren't going to deter giant corporations from making use of a method that will save them cash. I mean, let's be honest, if you're an artist and the only thing you bring to the table is that you're able to make realistic art of buildings and characters in a fantasy setting, you're not only practically indistinguishable from most things you see on ArtStation, but you're making yourself an easy target for a computer that won't complain about livable wages, mental health, and other things CEOs and shareholders don't like to hear. Like it or not, this robotification of art has been going on for a long time. As J.D. Cowan writes, quote, "We turn art into product and wonder why it is currently being treated as product. We consume, we do not savor. We do not delight. We simply move on to the next plate at the buffet. As long as there is another plate, we simply keep moving down the line. This is what makes the current cries for quote-unquote originality or quote-unquote humanity in the industry bizarre. At one point in your lifetime, has that ever been even the secondary goal of the entertainment or art industry? Never mind the primary one. Do you even know what the industry would be like if that was the case? Whatever happened to originality, to beauty, to adventure, to wonder? When did it get replaced for half-hearted tropes and rules from corporate overlords? With them in charge, are turned into flavor of the second gimmicks, meant to keep you glued to the constant content coming down the factory line. Formulaic gruel is all you get, because that's all you ever asked for. You never demanded better. No one did. I sure didn't. And now we complain? It's a bit too late for that. If we're going to survive in this landscape of AI, we as people have to learn how to ponder. We have to learn how to sit still and even face boredom against our overly stimulated brains in order to contemplate. We have to learn to be grateful, to love, and to look and listen. If we're unable to see heaven in a flower or remember our eternal destiny in the present moment, then we're basically living as robots, with the only difference that, compared to a robot in the workplace, we're, quote-unquote, incomplete. Of course, this is just a personal meditation of mine. Despite what I've said, I've really enjoyed Pokémon Concierge because of how it's essentially a comfy slice of life show where trainers take a break from modernity and relax. Even though I find its getaway job setup with the main character essentially a pipe dream that most people will likely never be able to replicate in real life, I do find it a valuable step forward toward what I hope to see more in media. If you want to see an extreme version of what I mean, I recommend looking at the short documentary video titled Life in Hidden Sight. This video is essentially everything I love about Cynthia's feelings, but taken up to 11. It's a great video. Also, I went back to the therapy page and realized that this picture was brighter than this version of Cynthia's feelings I've been initially working with and used to talk about my current opinions. As a kid, I've likely not seen the smiling edge of Cynthia's mouth because of the brightness. This means it's possible that the card was probably more contemplative and more emotionally powerful to childhood me than it really was. Still, even if childhood me might have been influenced by a distortion of the past, if it weren't for this, I likely wouldn't have been able to appreciate this. As an adult, I still stand by this opinion. Cynthia's Feelings is my favorite piece of Pokemon card art. Anyways, to conclude, if one were to ask the average Joe who's Cynthia's right-hand partner, they would say it's Garchomp, and they'd be right. But if one were to ask who's the one that's been with her practically since the very beginning, perhaps even before Gibble, I think it's the folks back home at Celestic Town that know the answer.